Hello. It is the 28th of October, 2016, and this is episode 62 of the Unseen Podcast. This is your host, Paul Carr. Now, tonight, as a Halloween episode, we thought we'd talk about something a little frightening, a little possibly real, but maybe not. So we brought an expert in one of these areas online with us, and tonight we have with us Jack Brewer. Okay, well, I don't have Jack Brewer just at the moment, but we will get him back. Jack Brewer, unmute your mic, please. Hello, Jack. Okay, well, let me introduce the rest of the panel while Jack is working through his technical difficulties, which have been considerable tonight. Not his fault. Ciro Villa.
Hey, Paul, how are you tonight? Glad to be back.
James Garrison.
How's it going, Paul?
Good, James. Glad to have you back after a little while. and feel free to put Colin on if he hasn't gone to bed yet. And Marsha Barnhart.
Hi, good to be here.
And Roger Wehbe.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, Jack, are you there yet? Jack is not there yet. Okay. Well, we're talking tonight about alien abductions. And Jack has written a book called The Greys Have Been Framed, which goes into this whole subculture of alien abductions, going way back even before the Betty and Barney Hill incident in the 60s to the CIA's adventures in hypnosis and mind control. Jack, are you there? Okay. We don't have Jack just yet. So what we will do, given that we don't have our special guest online yet, is we will go ahead and I'll introduce more of the topic. Now, Marsha, I know you have talked to people who've had strange, high strangeness experiences. What's your impression of that?
Well, this is a tough nut to crack because we all know that there's an awful lot of crapola out there, but there have been investigations I've done and talked with people who I think saw something genuine. I've also been involved with a Baltimore area experiencers group when I lived in the Baltimore area. And that was a group of people who had experiences and were quite certain that they were real, true experiences and not some type of made up memory or falsehood. And so my feeling is, and in addition to experiences I've had, and I'm not a nutcase, just ask me, but in addition to experiences I've had, I believe that something that is at this point ineffable is interacting with us in some capacity. I don't know if it's aliens, so I don't know if the extraterrestrial hypothesis is true and valid, but something that isn't human, at least isn't Homo sapien, I think, is interacting with a group of our population.
Okay, Jack, are you back with us now?
I am, sir. Hopefully I'll stay a while.
Okay, Jack, you recently published a book called The Greys Have Been Framed. We need to unpack that title as well as other things. Tell us a little about yourself and why you wrote the book.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, I'm the author of The Greys Have Been Framed, Exploitation in the UFO Community. And it's a book that explores the way deception and a lack of ethics shape and color the way the public perceives the UFO phenomenon. And I write the blog, the UFO Trail, where I post credible info on incredible topics. And I very much agree with what I heard Marsha talking about, that there may be something at the core of this phenomenon, but I think a lot more attention needs to be given to the extent that a number of demographics, ranging from credulous researchers to even con men and hoaxers in the intelligence community, for decades have shaped our perception of what's taking place to the extent that it's near impossible to be objective about it at this point. And absolutely, it could be unpacked a great deal.
Okay, well, let's talk about the early days. The CIA's experiments in the 50s. They were involved in mind control and hypnosis and things like that. Did they learn anything from that, or did they just go in the bit bucket?
It seems to depend on who you ask, Paul. There's authentic, declassified documents that make absolutely extraordinary claims about Manchurian candidate types of scenarios where the hypnotists seem to be able to control the subject to just fascinating extents. Yet we need to realize how much the subjects may have been willing to go along with the experiments, or it's been said, for instance, in skeptical circles, that it's difficult to conduct hypnosis experiments because there's no difference between the hypnosis and a placebo. And while I think there's something to be said for that, I don't think it disqualifies hypnosis from being a potentially harmful and dangerous activity, that if people believe they're influenced by it, then for all practical purposes, it might be working, not as a memory enhancing tool, but as something to modify behavior. And it continues to be used even in current day in interrogation scenarios and by the intelligence community, and possibly to induce false memories and gain confessions, or any number of things. But fascinating things I find from the mid 20th century research was that hypnosis expert Martin Ornay, and he was a CIA consultant. One of the things he did was lead his subjects to believe he had extraordinary power and advanced methods of hypnosis. And I've come to think that may have actually been his advanced method, was leading the subject to think so.
Well, that's kind of like how
really a
yeah, it's kind of like how a stage hypnotist does his job, right? I mean, he convinces the audience that he's got great powers.
I really don't know, but I would suspect so. It's certainly a fascinating line of work.
Right. Now, let's fast forward to the 1960s and Betty and Barney Hill. Virtually every now that in your view, is that the iconic abduction case, or is there something earlier that's just as important?
I think the Boas case is Villas Boas case in South America, Central South America, is pretty interesting. I think the Hills certainly are the most well known. My personal opinion of that case is that the jury's still out. I think there's a lot of explanations substantially more likely than a non-human intelligence. But a lot of my work takes somewhat of a skeptical view, because I think that the pendulum has swung so far into accepting the extraordinary that I feel like we could give a little more look to critical thinking and not jumping the gun. But a big point of that is that like the Hill case and any number of more that we could name, have so tainted what we think is happening that we accept symptoms of alien abduction that sometimes seem to be the most mundane things, waking up with a bruise, craving salt, things, that it's really just gone to a ridiculous extent that to be able just to get centered and think critically requires so much draining the swamp, as the saying goes.
Right. Well, now let's talk about the swamp that is the Benny and Barney Hill case. Uh, that was pretty much a hypnosis case, wasn't it?
Yes, sir, it was. And one of the things that often gets left out of the story is that Dr. Simon, by his own description, was not attempting to conduct an investigation. He was attempting to treat trauma and employ hypnosis as a treatment for trauma. And in that regard, he was probably relatively successful. By accounts such as Captain Sweat, that was involved with the couple and the doctor and others, Dr. Simon did not think that an alien abduction had taken place, whatever may have taken place, but it's become somewhat of a story, a legend, it borders on myth, when we really just don't know what happened. And there's any number of potential explanations. Probably the most likely just being witness confusion. And it was literally even a couple of years after the event that they began the hypnosis. So they had a chance to discuss things a great deal by then. And the potential explanations range from just witness confusion to even some type of covert intelligence project like the infamous MK Ultra and MK Naomi experiments, all the way to sure, maybe they were an alien abduction experiment. I just think if we listed them in a order of likelihood, that would be way down on the list.
Now,
But, that's just me.
where did the Greys come into all this?
I don't know if they do, Paul. What do you guys think? Have we even established they exist, really?
Well, how did the mythology? Let's say they didn't. How did the mythology come about?
My personal opinion would be that the hypnotist had a great deal to do with that. And that's what I mean, that we keep having to look at how much the ongoing narrative now colors what we suspect happens. Like when we see something odd in the sky, we see lights in the sky, we maybe we even see something that we truly feel is extraordinary. It doesn't seem like we should initially go to must be from another planet. That just really doesn't make sense other than the cultural conditioning. And I think that's where the Greys come in, that between movies and books and just story after story after story, we're conditioned to expect them to be somewhere in the narrative. And that does a couple of bad things at the least. One, it causes, when these hypnotists come along and they work with the experiencer, it causes an undue amount of stress. And another thing, it just totally colors the experience to make it so difficult to actually investigate what might have really been going on, that the experiencer feels they've met aliens, that they've met gray beings, extraterrestrials, and they see skepticism of that as a wholesale rejection of the story itself. And that's not necessarily even so. And it's just muddied the waters to the point that it's almost impossible to sort it out at all.
Right now, full disclosure, Jack, both Marsha and I have interviewed and investigated cases of people with high strangeness experiences. I wouldn't say abductions. Would you agree, Marsha? It's not necessarily talking about abductions.
Well, certainly some of my cases have been isolated and ongoing. So yes, I would say that they have included abduction in addition to high strangeness. Yes.
Okay. Well, my case, the one really, I've worked with Marsha on one case and done another one, and but the thing that impresses you is these people are not crazy. They are sincere, and they have memories that they can't account for. So, I mean, that's really, and if you strip away all the, like I said, all the ongoing narrative and all the cultural mythology, that's what they have is memories that don't make sense to them or don't make sense to anyone. Is there a core mystery, or is it, do we know? Is there any way to tell?
There may very well be. One of the things I like to assure investigators, such as you and Marsha, as well as experiencers, is that I don't claim to be qualified to tell people what happened to them. I don't make blanket across the board statements in the literal sense. I can tell you that I have researched and worked on specific circumstances involving specific investigators such as David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, John Carpenter, Barbara Lamb, and I can unequivocally tell you that there are problems with their research methodology and their claims to conduct scientific investigation. That is admittedly a completely different issue than what people may or may not be experiencing. So one doesn't necessarily equate to the other, and the people you guys have worked with may very well have experienced things that deserve deeper attention.
I'm glad you made that distinction. Now, my first memory of a gray was the cover of Whitley Strieber's book, Communion. Right? It's the classic gray. I'll try to put a picture of it in the show notes. It's a classic gray face, right? The huge eyes, the little or no nose, and this just slit for a mouth. This very triangular head, almost like the alien in an early episode of Star Trek in the 1968. But this alien being that Whitley Strieber claims to have seen, amongst many others, these largely come out through hypnotic regression. Now, can you explain what the researchers like Bud Hopkins meant by hypnotic regression?
Well, Bud and his colleague David Jacobs, neither one, to the best of my knowledge, actually have any formal training at conducting hypnosis. And by all that I can tell, have made a mess of the topic, as well as what people tend to think has taken place. Researchers that are qualified credentialed experts such as Elizabeth Loftus and Julia Shaw, they let us know through peer-reviewed clinical trials that false memories are very easy to implant. And for our memories to be incorrect doesn't mean we're flawed people. It means we're human. It's a characteristic of being human is to have memory inaccuracies. Now, when you take that and you add the investigator in that's not trained in hypnosis, that's trying to, that's, let's put it this way, that is very much biased, then more problems will arise.
Right. Now, there's a connection here. We should point out that Bud Hopkins passed away about 5 years ago. David Jacobs is still with us. There's a whole complex of the Jacobs, Hopkins, and others who conduct hypnosis routinely on people who claim to have been abducted by aliens or claim to have experiences like that. How much of that is fed into by just the cultural milieu of Whitley Strieber's books and movies and so on? People think they've been abducted because they've seen it on TV.
Well, again, it depends on who you ask. There's the side that says this is an experience no one wants to have, and we're embarrassed, and who would want this to happen to them. And then there's people that, such as me, who my research, Carol Rainey's research, indicates that people are clamoring and chomping at the bit to get in line to be the next famous investigators' big case. In Carol's work, we can see her document that people literally showed up at the door with the paperback in hand. They were so familiar with the narrative and how the hypnosis sessions might go. Mm-hmm. So I think a great deal of it is colored by social circumstances. And, when the rubber hits the road, we've just got to corroborate witness testimony, especially if obtained under hypnosis, with other circumstances. I mean, everything's just talk till it's corroborated. And again, I'd like to point out that doesn't mean that there's nothing of interest to study, but we could let the pendulum swing a little back towards caution, in my opinion.
Now, I'd like to make an interjection here, if I may.
Sure.
I don't know that it's accurate to, and I don't think you are, but I want to make this point, paint everyone with the same brush. Now, take, for example, Dr. John Mack. I believe he had excellent credentials, and I don't think anyone had a problem with his hypnosis that he did when it was done with other than people who purported to be having some type of UFO encounters. So I think there certainly are people who have in the past done very good work, and I think it's unassailable. So I just kind of wanted to make that point there. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are leading and a lot of people who lose their compass. But in the early days, you didn't have a lot of gray alien movies and stuff of that nature. These were kind of coming out of nowhere, and he was asked to look into it. So I just wanted to make that point, Jack.
Well, but when John Mack was doing his hypnosis, it wasn't really well understood. False memories were really not that well understood yet. I think that's something we need to point out. That
well, yes, but
this is a relatively new understanding.
Just because you're doing hypnosis does not mean you're implanting false memories. Not everybody.
That's
does
true,
that.
but the reliability of of so-called repressed memories or regression memories that are recovered memories. I don't think you can place a whole lot of reliability on that.
Well, the only thing here that to point out is that people conveniently forget, for example, that mentions and pictures of UFOs have been with us for centuries. This isn't new. And, black triangles have been talked about since the 1880s. So we have to be careful to not make this sound like this is something that the culture is creating. The culture didn't create it. It created a culture. That's my position.
Okay.
If I could comment a little, please, sir.
Sure.
Thank you. I empathize with your position, Marsha. There is a long and rich history of UFO sightings. There are reports of encounters. Some of them are fascinating. I think John Keel's work is absolutely fascinating. I think, though, if we're going to talk about using hypnosis as a memory enhancer, and I'd agree with you that John Mack was very interesting, and he was certainly qualified. I'm not in a position to critique Dr. Mack. I would say, however, that the current paradigm does not recognize regressive hypnosis as a scientific method of gathering evidence. And so my problem then with the people I mentioned, the specific ones I mentioned, and you're right, I don't want to paint with a wide brush, but my problems with David Jacobs, John Carpenter, Barbara Lamb, some of their colleagues, is if they do it under the umbrella of an organization such as the Mutual UFO Network that makes the assertion to be conducting scientific investigation, then they have responsibilities to work within the guidelines of what the scientific community recognizes as science. And that simply is not the case with what's currently happening among some of these, such as I mentioned, Jacobs, that claim to be advocates of science.
I agree. I agree with you.
Now, I know that in your book you talk about an apparently unrelated, but probably related panic that went on in the 70s called satanic ritual abuse. Didn't that involve a lot of hypnotic regression as well?
It certainly did. It certainly did. And many people were called out on the carpet, taken to court. Convictions happened by yes, the therapist worked with probably great deal of the time well-meaning, concerned therapists worked with people that came to think they were victims of satanic abuse, child molestation, horrible things that the stories were taken during hypnosis and not corroborated. And
I think we've lost Jack again. He's back. Hold on, Jack, you back? Okay.
yeah, and caused a lot of problems through hypnosis with people thinking they were remembering abuse. And yeah, essentially there we're just changing the perpetrator from alien to family member to satanic cult member, when we just have to have corroboration that any of this is actually taking place to take it literally.
Now, there were a lot of people who called themselves therapists back in those days whose credentials were unimpressive, and yet they had various memory recovery techniques that they used. And often if they couldn't get a memory of abuse from their clients, they would keep pressing until they got some kind of, and he said people end up destroying families. People accusing.
That's
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the challenges that I see in the alien abduction genre is that some of the investigators slash hypnotists slash therapists do not clarify their role, and it certainly should be clarified. As consumers, we begin to need to take responsibility to know whether we're looking for a psychoanalyst or a hypnotist or a therapist, and virtually get in writing what we're expecting and what will be delivered. You would behave much differently with someone looking for material for a book than you would someone with an actual license to conduct psychoanalysis and the way you would expect to be treated. So whether we're seeking emotional support or whether we're actually looking for something more substantial in an investigation should be taken into account.
Right. Well, a therapist who's getting paid by the session, what's their motivation? I mean, that's the sort of thing you really should ask yourself, right?
Right.
And that's even true today now. You have to be very careful with folks who may say, well, you need to come back every day, every week for the next 5 years till we work out your problems and figure out what your father did to you. And although we're now far more aware of the pseudoscience that went on then, I don't think we're completely caught up to it. Now, okay, Jack, I hesitate to go down this road, but I think we have to. We have to talk about David Jacobs.
I think you're right. It's difficult to have a discussion without that coming up. I again want to say I empathize with Marsha and the people you guys have worked with. I know people as well that I do not think they're crazy. I don't think they're lying. I think they experience things. I don't know what those things are, but I can pretty unequivocally tell you that the actions of people like David Jacobs are not moving the discussion forward. I think probably most people by now are aware of Emma Woods and the debacle there, that the responsibility just has to be taken by the investigator, that if a situation goes south, it can't be the person's fault that was seeking assistance.
Okay,
There's so many different. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ciro has a question.
Hey, well, I understand the importance of hypnosis and hypnotherapy in trying to recover lost memories out of purported alien abductees. I'm wondering about other than actual hypnotherapy, other forms of a more traditional, psychoanalysis, such as that do not involve hypnotherapy. How much of those other form of more traditional psychoanalysis are used in the interviews of purported abductees or experiencers?
Jack, you still with us?
I just came back. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I missed the question.
Well, I can make it quickly. So basically, I understand. Obviously, we'll be talking about mostly why hypnosis and hypnotherapy is widely used in trying to recover repressed memories for alien abductees.
Right.
What about the what about other more traditional forms of psychoanalysis that do not necessarily involve something as extreme as hypnotherapy? Just more more traditional forms of psychoanalysis. How much are those used in trying to interview purported experiencers?
Thanks. That's a great line of thinking, in my opinion, and I have also often thought similar myself. I'm not qualified to offer medical opinions on the situation. My personal
Oh, I think we lost Jack again. Okay. Well, he'll be back shortly. If experience is any teacher, let me just say that he's back now. Okay. You're back now, Jack. Thank you for being so persistent.
Thank you for letting me. I was saying that I'm not professionally qualified to answer that, but my personal opinion is that, again, we as a community would be wise to differentiate between whether a person is investigating their experiences or seeking emotional support and medical treatment and psychological treatment for those experiences. Given the fact that so many people, by their own description, called the circumstances traumatizing, I think that it would be wise to encourage people to get professional trauma treatment, not drugstore hypnotist pats on the back treatment, but professional treatment for trauma, and that could, at worst, help clarify circumstances and increase quality of life, as well as the accuracy of an investigation that might take place later. But I think that that's an excellent line of thinking, that we need to clarify what we're looking for, whether it's an investigation or psychoanalysis and treatment, and seek it from proper sources, not just people that say they want to help.
Right. So I have a quick follow-up. So I guess help me understand, are these hypnosis sessions mostly is their purpose mostly to validate some of the narratives of these experiencers, or is it more to be able to recover gaps in their memory, or is it a little bit of both?
In my estimation, it began in the well, it really, as Paul said, it started out.
Okay, I think we've lost Jack again. Although, in principle, he's still here. Sorry, listeners, about this unreliable connection. Anybody else have it? Oh, there. He's okay. We have two Jacks. Okay.
Take 4.
Go ahead, Jack.
I think it started out by being misinterpreted with Dr. Simon. He was trying to treat trauma, and the stories that emerged got taken literally. Then later, circa 80s, 90s, especially, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Bud Hopkins, they wanted to fill in gaps. And while I don't know, I couldn't say what someone's intent was, but it certainly appears suspicious at times that they were looking for material in the cases of Hopkins and Jacobs. And there's quite a bit on my blog about that can be found, where they're demonstrated to have been incredibly leading. In fact, it's difficult to put in a summary on a podcast how incompetent and leading it was, especially while under the guise of organizations promoting them that claim to be dedicated to science.
Right. James, you had a question? James? Okay, I guess...
His mic is muted.
James, your mic is muted. Okay, well, I just wanted to... Yeah, it looks to me like Hopkins very quickly, early on, decided that these experiences of people were resulting from an alien civilization coming to Earth and invading people's bedrooms and doing, unethical things to their bodies. And that sort of formed his whole narrative. And he was closely allied with Jacob Jacobs, who's a history professor at Temple, not as some people might think, a psychology professor or a doctor, although he calls himself Dr. Jacob Jacobs, just to make... James, are you there? No. Okay. So, Jack, now, David Jacobs is still with us. Bud Hopkins died a few years ago. But where did Jacobs come up with this idea of the alien-human hybrid?
I think that Bud started it, if I recall right, and under extremely questionable circumstances. The witnesses were led. I've heard some of the recordings in which they're just outright told that they're being that they're involved in sexual experiments and breeding programs while under hypnosis. These are not privileged recordings by any means. They've been published and are available on blogs such as Emma Wood's. I have some of it on my blog with Carol Rainey's assistance. And the narratives continued. They have gotten, even if we put aside some of the ridiculous lack of ethics, some of the things that David Jacobs was saying to Emma on the phone, long distance telephone hypnosis. Even if we put that aside and the inappropriate things he was discussing with her, we still have an absurdly just an absurd gap in rationality, where he claims that these hybrid beings are being put into society and trained to work and spend money, and he claims he knows where they live, and that they have just been wreaking havoc in people's homes, that he knows these people and where they live, yet it is interested in no way, shape, or form, with all of the technology available today, to present anything other than verbally that this is happening. I don't know where to even get, like, if that in and of itself doesn't make someone dismiss the narrative, I really don't even have anything else to discuss with them about that topic.
We have a question from Tyler Cokejohn. Hybrids allegedly identified, hybrid dwelling places known. When will we see DNA, antibody profiles, or one available for a med exam? So,
absolutely, that's a great point. David Jacobs, Barbara Lamb, others claim to literally know hybrid beings, and don't have time to to present this and collect their Nobel Prize is just an insult to intelligence.
Okay. James, are you available yet?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Have you looked into the relationship between the
Well, we lost James again. Sorry. James lives in a tornado-ravaged part of the country. Yeah, go ahead and type the question, James, and I'll just speak it out. Now, the other question that Tyler had was pretty close to the
circumstances?
James, we're just barely hear you. Why don't you just go ahead and type it? I'll read it for you. Sorry, listeners, this has been a very problematic hangout. We'll figure out a better way next time.
You were saying Tyler had another comment?
Yeah, well, it's related. He says if hybrids are human in every way, which I'm not sure they're human in every way, but how are they educated? Maybe you identify one with a math test?
Yeah. See, David Jacobs, in some of his presentations and an interview I conducted with him that can be found on my blog, he asserted that there's really not much point in trying to test them physically because they're human in every way. So never mind the DNA test.
So they're not alien hybrids, are just human in every way, or
they're human in every way except their mental ability to control the abductee, which I don't know. There's so many holes in that I can't even begin. It kind of reminds me of the old, there was a comedian, his name was Wright, and he used to say, somebody broke in my house last night and stole everything and replaced it with exact replicas. and it kind of reminds me of that. But, it's all going to take us back to, we can go in this circle about these guys that claim to be men of science and claim to be trying to do good work and claim to be empathetic of the experiencer, that are just wreaking havoc in their lives. And we can wade through the narratives and all of the stories, and well, they don't let us know this because they can't tell us that, and we're trying to do this, and we're trying to protect their anonymity, and they just have an excuse and a reason for everything why it's only in a paperback book and never actually put in a paper and presented to scientists or put in a lab under a microscope. And when we get through all of the talk, we're always going to come back to, you have to corroborate it or it's just talk. And so as we started the discussion with, I just once again reiterate, please, that we have swung so far from center that we have influenced people about what they think experiences are going to be that haven't even happened to them yet. When they do see something in the sky, when they do experience something strange, they're already going to think they know what it is because of this massive amount of storytelling that has taken place, that virtually none of it is substantiated.
I would have to say that a big part of this whole swamp is MUFON. And they have aided and abetted this. It's as if they have no oversight over their speakers. And I think they're terribly tainted with this. It brings in crowds and they want crowds. But MUFON, I think, has completely lost any cachet. About the only thing they are good for now is for somebody to be able to make a report of a sighting, but you have New Fork for that, and you have the Aerial Phenomenon Investigations team, which we are. But MUFON is just, it is beyond the pale right now. I don't think one can salvage it.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree adamantly with everything you just said. We could find a report here or there that was pretty well done. A dedicated researcher here and there that works with MUFON, but by and large, I completely agree, Marsha, and I would call them a primary perpetrator of the situation. And I think the worst part of it is that they claim to be dedicated to scientific study. If they claim to be an entertainment group, or if they presented themselves as a place that all opinions are equal and can be discussed openly, and a club, fine, but they don't. They claim to be scientific based, and that just makes it all the worse, in my opinion.
Okay, Jack, I'm going to have to read James' question because he's having connection difficulties. He says, I was wondering if he had looked into the relationship and similarities between today's abduction claims and the older claims of the incubi, succubi, old hags, angelic visitations, and the like. Aside from the primary perceived cause, alien, angel, demon, etc., they seem to be extremely similar in description.
How about you guys? Why don't you start, Marsha or Paul? What do y'all think about that?
I would agree with James that the notion of little people coming into your room while you were asleep and doing rude things to you is very old. It goes way back, way before the Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that throughout antiquity, there have been reports of interactions with beings that overpower the human and are able to do things. And I think there is some validity to it, but you just can't get a handle on it. It's just too much. You can't get a handle on this, but there is something, and it has been going on, and I think it continues to go on. But how are you going to glean through all the crap to get to these few nuggets of real, true science?
Well, yeah, it's not just deception, right? It's or mythology. People have experiences with sleep paralysis, which seem extremely real. I know I have had experiences like that, and it seems so real that you think it's real, but then when you wake up, you realize, if it was so terrifying, why did I fall asleep right afterwards? And that kind of thing could easily work its way into the popular mythos.
See, the Greys have been framed, guys. They couldn't have done it all. Seriously, yeah, I'd agree too. It certainly didn't start with Betty and Barney, and there were certainly reports of fascinating phenomena long before the CIA was ever formed. It's not all Mirage Men either. Now, what that list of explanations is, it might keep growing as time goes on and more things are understood and more technology influences people as well. But yeah, I very much agree that mankind has had a dance with the strange and the unexplained as long as we know of, pretty much, whatever those things may prove to be.
It's a little bit of a chicken and an egg kind of situation, in a way, because is it the memory that are the memories that are creating the narratives, or the narratives that are creating the memories?
I think that's exactly why it so often gets talked about with consciousness and uh, religion and philosophy. It goes hand in hand with deeper meanings. And I think that's why a lot of people feel like that the literal spaceman uh, is even a bit simple for the more complex dynamics that take place.
Right now, uh, what is there? I'm as I mentioned earlier. Both Marsha and I have spoken to high strange experiencers. Not all of which will use the A word. Not they won't all say they've been abducted. Some of them will simply say, "I have these memories of very strange things that have happened to me." Some of them are corroborated by their friends and family. Others not. So, uh, is there a way to get to the truth about these things, or should we just recognize that we've forever contaminated the evidence?
I think there's a lot of evidence for things, and as you guys all well know, there's a difference between evidence and proof. I think there's a lot of evidence that things have taken place. I mean, of course, witness narrations are evidence, um, be they a weak form thereof. I think that in order to actually get under a glass some things that are happening is going to require more forensic work. And the good news of that is that it's more affordable than ever and is going to become easier to access as technology continues to advance. But that's actually, Paul, what began to get me interested in some of the darker shades of the genre, some of the exploitation, is that it's not that I necessarily even doubt that some odd things, some extraordinary things happen that are reported, but I did get somewhat desensitized to it, and I began to become more interested in the social dynamics and what people were doing because that those were some threads that could be pulled. And so I can understand why someone would be more interested in the miracle at Fatima and what on earth happened, literally. Um, it's just going to require a lot of work from, I think, people in different disciplines working together. And we're going to have to be willing to accept the answers if they're not exactly what we were hoping to.
All right. Well, we don't even know what the questions are yet, right?
Not always.
I think until someone is gonna slip a GoPro camera into an abduction and be able to record the entire event to put it on YouTube.
Well, that leads me to another question that Jack, I think you know something about. MUFON had an anonymous person who claimed to be a frequent abductee, right? And they instrumented his house with microphones and so on. Did we ever get that data?
We did not. There was a project. It began by called the Abduction Monitoring Project, and they had trouble getting people on board, scientists on board, and they then began to call it the Ambient Monitoring Project because they took a device that would just look like something normal in the home, like books or something sitting on your desk. And they took samples of the ambient environment. And then when these abductees that agreed to have this in their home would keep a journal and then report when they thought something had happened. And very disappointingly, they never never published the results of that story. that study, and there's a whole lot of that was actually one of the things that began to get me more interested in the darker sides of the of MUFON, of the genre, because the answers for why they wouldn't publish it never really made sense. They claimed to run out of funding, but they claimed that after they had stated funds were in place, and then they had said that the research was being analyzed, and then they said they didn't have money for the analysis. And it's a prime example of how it's not scientific study to not take your research project to fruition. And even if it led us to believe like a worst case scenario that there was no change in the ambient environment and people said all kinds of things were happening, then that's something that as researchers the community would still want to know to take to the next phase. And it in my opinion, was just completely unacceptable to just sit on the data, not share it, not give it to anybody, and say we're just done with that project and we're going on to something else.
Okay. I wish they had shared those data.
It was one of the most exciting projects that may have ever come along, Paul. People were really excited about it when it was announced and prioritized, and it was like, wow, this is great. Now this is, getting at the heart of the matter. This is taking samples, measuring what's going on around these people when they're claiming to
Exactly.
have these experiences, and then they said, well, it didn't work out.
Yeah, with today's technology, you would think that we made so many advancements in technology. There should be a better way to document certain things, especially for reoccurring events, right?
Right.
You would think that should be a way to have some sort of evidence that is a little bit more tangible, I suppose.
Well, they sent a whole team out to that Skinwalker Ranch area that were reportedly credentialed scientists and specialists. And I think this was on Bigelow's dime.
Yeah, that was Bigelow, not MUFON. Yeah.
Yeah, and even Bigelow with his group either would not report or did not get reportable data because, I remember reading articles about this, that when they would set up a camera to do these things, then oddly enough, the camera would not work. Or when they asked a piece of equipment to be able to find a spectrum of light when these anomalies occurred, well, they would go belly up. So that's really hard for a scientist to try to glean any information out of these anomalous occurrences that they cannot get readings on. They never really were able to come to much of a conclusion there other than a head scratcher.
Yeah, John Alexander is one of the people involved with that, and he has spoken up about his experiences there. Although I think most of them have non-disclosure agreements.
Oh yeah. Well, he's pretty nailed down, John Alexander, and I know from the things I've read, he's pretty sure something is going on, but nobody can get a handle on it. But science is having a hard time cutting their teeth on this because it's not playing nice with science.
Yeah.
It is a whole level above what we're used to doing science-wise, it would seem, this phenomenon.
That may very well be so. I certainly empathize with the perspective. I have felt that way. I did feel that way strongly when I first started attending the conferences and reading the books. What's been a few summers ago now, and literally, a long time ago. And I qualify because I wanted to say I've gotten so jaded with where the intelligence community lapse into the research that I just more than ever I feel like if they can't put it on the table and it's just talk, that I'm unconvinced, especially when it's members of the intelligence community that are promoting a story or discussing something that is their opinion on something. Yet again, I'd really have to emphasize that doesn't mean that nothing's worth investigating. I just feel like we got so far into the weeds with, from the Robertson panel forward, CIA's willingness to use UFOs as a psychological tool, and from the 50s forward, that we really don't know how much it continued, and researchers probably won't until decades from now know what it will be declassified and show how the topic was exploited for purposes that had nothing to do with an actual paranormal phenomenon, although there may be one. And so it's very complex and can be, and I've come to be extremely skeptical when the intelligence community is involved.
Yeah, and rightly so.
Is there any historically? Is there any documented artifact whatsoever that that somebody has claim to be some sort of encounter? I am aware of other type of UFO phenomenology out there. Of course, we all know about the flying objects and so on and so forth. But more specifically in the realm of an encounter, with an alien being, is there anything out there in form of documentation?
Well, multiple witness cases where more than one person observed.
What about photographic or video documentary evidence?
Nobody believes any of it. There's no credibility with video or print.
Yeah, but I was wondering if there was anything at all out there.
Yeah, the video is a catch-22 anymore. If it's a good one, everybody thinks it must be fake. But so I empathize, Marsha. I was looking on the Black Vault website the other day, and he has some cases, papers presented of trace evidence. There are some researchers particularly interested in cases that have artifacts, landing cases, that kind of thing. And that would be an interesting line of research in itself. I'm not aware of anything that specifically qualifies itself as conclusive evidence, as much as evidence that something took place. But yeah, there are trace cases that have physical artifacts. I just don't think it's clear what it indicates happened.
I understand.
Roger, you had something you want to say?
I was just wondering, why, if these things are like, how often do abductions happen in the U.S.? Like, is there any statistics? Like, who really counts this stuff?
Well, MUFON has done research. MUFON has done. I can't think of the word right now. When you call somebody or contact someone and ask them a bunch of surveys.
Yeah,
yes.
But are we talking about hundreds of people or thousands a year?
Well, it depends on, Jacobs would have you believe that hundreds of thousands have been taken without their knowledge, and hundreds of thousands of hybrids are existing. I don't think there's any credible science on that either, how many people purport to have had these experiences.
I'd agree with that. there was an extremely flawed survey done. I think it was in the 90s. Bigelow was involved in that. He bankrolled some work that Hopkins and Jacobs and some of their colleagues did, and it was criticized a great deal because they ascertained from the questions that millions of Americans were being abducted without ever even asking on the survey. And
I think we lost Jack again. Well, yeah, and to answer your question from my perspective, Roger, we know that a lot of people have memories of being abducted by aliens. We don't know how many of them those memories are hypnotically recovered versus consciously recovered. There's a lot of things there that are variables that are important that nobody's really done the survey work to find out. Are you back with us, Jack?
So we're saying that this number could be extremely small or extremely large, and we really don't know.
I don't think I think it's more than a few and less than millions. The millions number came from, as Jack just pointed out, some pretty flawed research. Are you back with us, Jack?
I am, thank you.
So,
well, I know accounts that I've read about that, the veracity is questionable, of course, but accounts I've read, lots of times this comes from people who have had conscious recall of abduction and have been with a group of other people. I read one account where a man said his entire neighborhood was up in this ship, and nearly everyone but him was kind of in a zombie state, and that they weren't even there in their mind. So they kind of extrapolate that this is the case with many people. They've been taken up, but have absolutely no memory or consciousness of it whatsoever. And one or two who do in that group report it. So
that could cause big problems at the block party. But
my experience in local meetings, regional meetings, even state and larger meetings would be it's a lot of people. In fact, I had a friend that used to say the paranormal doesn't seem to be so para. And I think a lot of people, I would even venture as far as to say most, encounter something that they don't know what happened, and
dear. Okay, we lost Jack again. It's not Jack's fault.
He's not even going to have conscious recall that they keep taking him.
Yeah, we're going to have to hypnotize Jack to remember this podcast. Well, we've gone about an hour and 12 minutes. So what we're going to do is get to our recommendations soon now. Not every episode, but most episodes, we ask our panelists to make some recommendations, which don't have to be related to the topic of the podcast. So we'll get to those in a minute. Let's see if we can get Jack back.
Yeah, we'll have to get together and not talk again sometime.
We've been speculating that you are keep on getting abducted.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was saying, I think most people, or at least a lot of people, have things happen to them that they're not sure what it was. Then it depends on really, I think, whether they start hanging around abduction people or ghost people or psychic people as to how they begin interpreting what it was that happened. And like Marsha was saying, though, yeah, there are people that just absolutely straight up say it was a gray, it was a spaceship, it was this, that, and the other. And then much more common are people that aren't really sure what happened, and the event gets further and further in time, and then more and more difficult to sort out, and at some point maybe you just have to shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know.
Right. Well, I had a case where there was a husband and a wife. The wife was a very religious person, so she interpreted the experiences from her religious perspective, and she felt that her prayers helped to drive away the bad experiences. Her husband, less so. Her husband thinks it's aliens from outer space, and because she was involved with the religion and he was less involved. I think that had a lot to do with how they interpreted it. So anyway, we're now going to get to our recommendations, and we lost Jack again. Okay, we'll start with Ciro then. Ciro, what's your recommendation?
Yes, well, first of all, I want to mention real quick, as a side note, a quick side note, that there was this famous incident, the Travis Walton abduction incident,
right.
and apparently they're coming up with the movie as recent as maybe next month, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, there was already a movie about that. It was called Fire in the Sky.
Yeah, I know, but this is a new one. I think this is actually a documentary movie.
Oh,
I've seen the trailer. I'll give you the link after the show.
Okay.
But my recommendation actually is going to be about a visualization of space and how music is related to the distances from the planet Earth. There's a very nice website created by 4 developers called Lightyear.fm, and basically you can basically travel in distance from Earth going outward, and it will basically play the music of the years correlated with the distance as we go further and further away. And it was inspired by the introduction of the movie Contact, which some of you might recall, where there's a shot of an ever distancing imaginary craft coming out from Earth, and the music playing and fading in the radio signal in the years. So it's a nice visualization, and I really recommend it.
great. I mean, I'm a big fan of Contact, so I'm sure. Roger, can you hear me? Your turn for a recommendation.
I'm actually with him for Contact. I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Contact, starring Jodie Foster. It's out on Blu-ray. How about you, Marsha?
Oh man, I am enraptured with a new HBO series called Westworld. And it deals with 3D printed artificial beings that are programmed with a degree of memories and scripts that they run as ongoing characters in a really elegant Disney World type environment that's set in the Old West, which is how it gets its name, Westworld. And I think one of the more provocative aspects of this series is how the programmers are slowly imbuing these artificially made beings with consciousness. And for me, what I find most fascinating is that it dovetails into the idea that some have put forward recently about our existence possibly being artificially created and our world being essentially a programmed existence by some unknown unknown control system. And it just is really fascinating. It's deep. It's on Sunday evenings. We watch it on demand, but if you're watching HBO and you don't have on demand, it's Sunday evenings.
Right.
Westworld.
James, can you get on?
Let's see if this works.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit broken up, but keep going. I guess not. Okay. Jack Brewer, tell us about where we can learn more about you and your book.
Thank you. The Grades Have Been Framed is available on Amazon. You can read more on the UFO Trail.
Go ahead.
You can read more on the UFO Trail, my blog. The movie, Ciro, that's the name, right? Ciro?
Yes, my name is Ciro.
Yes, that you were talking about is called Travis, the true Travis Walton story, or
Yeah,
something to that
exactly.
effect.
Yeah, exactly. And it's with documentary movie, right? I believe.
Yes, it was just at the Orlando Film Festival
Exactly.
last week, and it won Best Documentary. So
Yep.
it's a worthy recommendation, apparently. But yeah, my book's on Amazon. The Grays Have Been Framed. My blog is the UFO Trail. I'd recommend most anything by Carol Rainey. She's got good stuff on the topic. Tyler Coke-John. I like Mark Pilkington's stuff. There's so many good people that it's a shame.
I agree. It is a shame that we keep losing Jack.
Gone he is.
What about you, James? James, can you get in? Oh, I'll read James' recommendation. He says, my recommendation is another podcast. It's a Drunks and Dragons podcast. It's a real play D&D podcast that makes math fun. They drink something. They drink, I think it means to write beer, but they sear and play Dungeons and Dragons. Surprisingly enjoyable. Travis was a strange guy, Paul.
I've got to double up, Paul, tonight and come up with another little bit of recommendation, if you don't mind. This is a completely related to the theme of tonight's show. It's a new show that is on TV, and it's called People of Earth, and it's a comedy, mystery / sci-fi regarding abductees. With I don't know if any of you have seen the pilot. It was last week. This week actually.
What network is it on?
I read about it.
Yeah, it's really neat. It's obviously it's over the top, but a lot of the things are based on some of the stereotypical occurrences that that alien abduction normally are characterized by. So it's a really an interesting idea as a show, I believe.
And what is this called again?
It's called People of Earth.
And it's on what show?
It's on the regular. It's on. Oh man, I don't know if it's on NBC on CBS. It's on one of the main channel, but it's on the mainstream channels.
Huh.
Okay, people have to stop recommending TV series because I'm still not caught up to Orphan Black yet.
This is a good one. It's brand new. I'll send you the link.
Dude, you need to do Orphan Black.
Hey, can I recommend another one?
What you got, Roger?
I was thinking Stargate.
Why don't you say that for next time?
All right.
Too late.
Too late. Okay, well. Oh, James Garrison says, I knew Travis Walton, and I used to live not too far from where it was. Yeah, James is from Arizona.
Snowflake. It happened in Snowflake, Arizona.
James is a snowflake, yes.
Oh, so that was nearby, yeah.
Travis's story is really interesting because it's kind of.
Oh, drat, they got him again.
Oh, yeah, the MIBs grabbed him at the last second.
He was about to disclose something important. So
they do not want him to talk.
Exactly.
Dun dun.
Well, anyway, we need to close this up. My recommendation is unrelated to any of those previous, other than people. Please stop recommending. I'm going to recommend a TV series that also has a related podcast. The podcast is free. The TV series is on True TV in the U.S. I don't know if it's available overseas or not, but the podcast is available anywhere in the world. It's called Adam Ruins Everything, and it's a comedian named Adam Conover who essentially takes your most cherished notions of whatever it is and ruins them with factual information. So he's done more than 20 episodes so far. He's done things like shopping malls, weddings, and of course the election, and elections in general. He's done lots of other things, funerals, Hollywood, and it's funny. The podcast is less comedic, but more in depth. The TV show is fast paced and more scripted and funny. So it usually involves a number of comic actors playing out historical roles or whatever. So that's Adam Ruins Everything. It's on True TV. Plus, there's a podcast also called Adam Ruins Everything, which is closely related. Okay, we're going to go around one last time. Let everybody say good night and give any last bits of information they want. So let's start with Jack while he's still here. Oh, we lost Jack again. Yay.
God.
Okay, Ciro.
Yes, thank you so much for giving me the chance to be on the show again, Paul. It was fun, and hope to be able to be on another show nearby coming up. And happy Halloween, everyone.
Yes. James, can you hear us? Okay, well, we've suffered with audio problems with James all night. Hopefully we'll get those fixed sometime in the future. Marsha.
Yes, it's been a pleasure as per normal. This was my topic idea. I was talking about this for the Halloweeny kind of crowd.
So this is your fault, huh? Okay.
Yes, they've been taking Jack because of me. But yeah, I want to tell everybody out there to educate yourself. Don't fall for stupid ploys. Try to discern what's around you and be mindful that 90% of what you hear and 99% of what you see is probably crap. But you can find the truth if you look with open eyes.
Okay. Roger, how about you?
I just want to say it was great as usual. I love these podcasts. And also happy Halloween, everybody. Gonna have a good time going out with the little kids. We're gonna go hit up the neighborhood, bring a bunch of candy in. So we're gonna have a good time.
Yeah. Jack, can you hear me?
I'm here. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Marsha, Ciro, Paul, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thanks,
James,
Jack, and
thank you.
thanks for no fault due to no fault of your own, getting kicked out of the hangout numerous times, then coming right back. My kids are a little older, so we won't. I don't know if we're going out for candy this year, but well, we might anyway.
I would if I could get away with it. I love them Snickers.
It doesn't. If you put a gray alien rubber mask on, nobody knows how old you are.
Oh my God.
And a little space
Just
suit.
don't put a clown outfit on, right? You'll get shot if you
creepy
put a
clowns
outfit on
are
right
shot
now.
on sight.
Bad move.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. I apologize for the technical difficulties tonight. That I don't understand the origin or how inconsistent those are likely to be. We may try a different strategy on the next episode, which will be in 2 weeks. Then we're going to skip the week of Thanksgiving and do one in December. And then we will skip the Christmas holidays and the New Year's, and we'll be back January 13th. So we only have about 3 more episodes. Well, we have 2 more episodes this year, and then we'll be back in the new year. So if you'd like to be on the panel, it doesn't have to be these people. It can be you and some other people. All you have to do is come on over to our Google Plus community and add your name, and you will get an invitation roughly every 2 weeks, depending on the time of year. I think next summer, if we're still doing this podcast, we will take a summer hiatus for sure, or do some non-episodes. We also have the Unseen Pub coming up. That's coming up. The first one will be November 4th. Yeah, November 4th. The Unseen Pub will be even less structured than this. So anybody who wants to, I'll post the link in the community. Anybody who wants to can come in the Unseen Pub and chat about whatever they want. You can even talk about the sex lives of celebrities or sports or other completely uninteresting things if you want to. Or we can talk about the next episode of the Unseen Podcast, or we can talk about the latest advances in science, whatever amuses you. And I'll take as many people as can fit into the hangout. So that will be November 4th. That's the next thing we do. That's a week from today. Today is the 28th of October here in the East Coast of the United States. It's this podcast should be out on the 29th or so. The next actual recording session for the Unseen Podcast will be on the 11th of October. I think Marsha wants to talk about nanotechnology or something like that.
Yes.
Well, Marsha's in charge, so
You mean November?
Marsha.
It's just that I weighed in there first. You always say get in there and talk about a topic.
That's
So,
right.
I'm a producer for it. I'm producing some topics for you, dude.
Hit first and hit hard. Yeah.
That's right.
And then we'll skip Thanksgiving, and then we'll come back in December, and that one is completely wide open. Anybody, the invitations for that one are not out yet, so if you want to be on that one, come on over. Go to unseenpodcast.com to learn more. We are a spinoff of the Wow Signal. The Wow Signal podcast has its own website, wowsignalpodcast.com. Blogs will be moving soon, probably in December. We'll move the blogs to some other platform. Hopefully we'll keep the same basic URLs like wowsignalpodcast.com and unseenpodcast.com and disownSky.com. That's my personal blog, which is closely related to the Wow Signal. And if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, whatever, please feel free to let us know. Our email is unseenpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can come over to the community at Google+. We have a listeners and a participants community. We also have a listeners subreddit, which has not seen much traffic, and I'd like to see more people over there. So go over to Reddit and register your thoughts on the listener subreddit. Love to see you. We get criticism sometimes. We get comments that are negative. Those are fine, as well as praise, as well as suggestions for future subjects, future guests, everything. So we're all for that. I'd like to thank Jack Brewer. His book is The Greys Have Been Framed, Exploitation in the UFO Community. It's a book that I think is long overdue. So check, and also you can check Jack's blog out at the UFO Trail. I'll have links to that in the show notes at unseenpodcast.com. This is episode 62. So look out for episode 62. You'll find us there. And we will be back with the Unseen Pub next week, which is going to be a YouTube series, not available on the regular RSS feed. And then we'll be back in 2 weeks on the 11th with the next episode where Marsha will educate us on nanotechnology. So, so everybody, good night, and we'll see you then.
Bye.
Good night.